Hey, what's up guys? So we've got another image sent in for me to edit, this one here. So trying to recreate the exact same edit with the exact same photo he has sent us. So that's why I want you guys to comment down below who you guys want to see, because then I go and reach out to them on Instagram and ask them to send in a photo. So you guys can go give him a follow down in the description. I'll put all of his links down there, and let's just talk a little bit about his style so you can see there's a lot of vibrance to the image. So we're going to be really bringing up the vibrance and saturation for some of these tones. There's not much of a fade, if any, in the blacks. So we've got pretty true blacks there. And then you guys, if you guys like this style, I'll be putting a link to his presets here. So you can just come over here, otherwise click here, and you guys can come over here and check out his presets and see if you like them. So come over here guys, check them out, flick through the before and afters, and if I just go back into Instagram. Okay, so let's get into Lightroom and see if we can create something pretty awesome like this. And as you can see guys, awesome as content, awesome travel photos. Go give them a follow down in the description, and let's get into creating something like this one right here. Here's the raw unedited image and the edited one from his Instagram. So this is a screenshot of its Instagram and the raw one here that he has sent us. So first things first, let's really bump up the exposure and let's up the warmth, because you can see we're too cold in almost every area. The blues are a bit too blue, and we need to warm it up by just a few hundred. Okay, let's keep going. And as you can see, if we up the vibrance, up the saturation, you sort of can't get the colors in those skies. There's no way to go about it. So what we've actually got is another image that he has sent. And this is the same location, just a little longer in the evening. So we're going to make this one, so if I dehaze, you can see, if we play around with this later on, we're going to be able to get the same colors as he's got over there. So you can see this is just a little later in the day, and it looks like, if you see this tree here, that's that tree there in that image. So slightly different angle, but we've got to edit this one as well, and then in Photoshop we're going to blend it in with the other image. So if we just go back to one we're working on, so we're going to edit this one, and we're not going to focus on the sky. So any changes I'm making, I don't care how the sky looks at the moment. So let's carry on. Let's up the shadows. You can see how you can see a lot more, say, in that reflection. There's a few other areas you could look, but we need to be able to see more in those areas. Okay, and then we want a bit more brightness and a pop. We want these areas, say the brightest areas, to have a bit more of a punch to them. So whites are going to come up. And then we want to bring down the highlights a lot. So it's kind of hard to see. Highlights sort of gives a little more of a flatness to the image. It's very, very common to do. So if there was a very common thing people do with these sliders, it would bring highlights down, maybe not to 100, but bring highlights down, bring shadows up, bring whites up a little, and then blacks maybe up a touch. But that's very common. A lot of images I edit, that's sort of the way the sliders go. And then I'm just going to add a bit of haze into the image just to soften it up. You can see that sort of brightens and sort of brings up the shadows almost. Just gives a nice softness to the image, especially at sunset. It's just a bit more contrast. contrast. This is creating contrast between the highlights, shadows, whites, blacks. Let's keep going. Let's go with vibrance. You can see vibrance and saturation. Vibrance pretty much does what you think it does. It just kind of creates more of a pop, kind of saturates the colors more in the highlights and the midtones, so there's vibrance brought up a lot. You can see it hasn't really affected down in the darker areas. Then if I bring up saturation, it kind of affects the whole image evenly. So let's roll with that. Okay, and we're not gonna mess with tone curve for this image because I think we are looking good how it is. There's no real fade, and yeah, we get the color pop from having the vibrance brought up. So split toning, let's move on to that. In the highlights, I'm just going to put a warmth that sort of enhances the sunset look a little. Very subtle amount. You only want to be subtle, almost always want to be subtle with the split toning. And a nice blue in the shadows. You can see we've got a lot of blue in the shadows down there. Okay, so it's split toning done. If I just turn that off and on, it's very subtle. You can't see a lot going on there, but we're just adding a little bit more warmth to the highlights, a little more coolness to those blues in the shadows. Alright, so we're going to come down and do calibration now, and I'll just whip through this. So we've got a lot of purple tones going on, and he has helped me with a lot of these settings. So I can't tell you exactly why, but could be part of the preset pack you guys can get, or you can see what these shifts do. They're pretty subtle. So this shift here is just going to get some more orange and teal tones. It's a pretty common one to shift just a few, and then saturation down. You can sort of see that sort of gives warmer tones if you shift the green primary. So we'll just do that a tiny bit. So this one here is orange and teal tones. Pretty much always want to shift it to the left if you do shift it. I've never really seen people shift it the other way. And very often I see people shifting the greens out to the right. Sort of gives, I'm not too sure, that way it gives a lot of yellow tones. And this sort of gives a bit more blue and warmer tones. And then red primaries. I'm not too sure what to do down there, but right, he's helped me out with a lot of these settings, so you can be confident that they are correct. And now we want to do hue saturation, so we want to dial in our colors and brightness of those colors. So let's go with hues first, or maybe even saturation. Let's just roughly get the saturation right. I think we're alright. Let's go with oranges. So as you can see, these bits here and the building there, we're very yellow at the moment, and it looks as though the oranges are affecting those areas. So I'm just going to warm it up. Yellows sort of affecting more of the trees and the sky. And then almost always in this situation, I'll be warming up the yellows, because that's the sort of vibe we want to go for a nice golden sunset. Greens, so the greens you can see in the background, and ours look a little too green. We want them to be a little more yellow, a little more warm. So let's shift them this way. Aquas. So we look pretty good at the moment, just the blues and the water. We want, we're about good actually. Just a nice teal, make it slightly more teal by shifting the blues in that direction. Purples, not much going on there. Okay, so I think our oranges are a little saturated. So bring that down a touch. And what's hard to notice is luminance sometimes. So you might think we've somehow got our oranges wrong, like maybe they look a little more red over on this left picture, but I think we've got it about right. It's the luminance we have to change now. So that's just going to create sort of deeper tones, like less brightness to that color, but that can throw some people off on getting the right hues. So it can appear to have changed the color slightly, but I think we're going to drop the luminance of the oranges a bit. And that's quite a common thing to do because it sort of adds richness to the skin tones and buildings and a lot of things like that. And we'll do that with the reds as well. And then very common thing to do is bring up the luminance, the yellows. So as you can see, we look a lot more vibrant, bright when we up the luminance of the yellows, because yellow is affecting the edges of almost everything. The sun's hitting it, so it's giving off these yellow tones. So it's the edges of everything almost, and we want to brighten all them, and you get the nice effect of creating quite a nice pop and glow. Greens, keep the greens nice and deep. And now we look a little flat through the water. We're not very bright in these areas, so I'm going to up the luminance of aquas and the blues to kind of match up around here. Okay, saturation, I'm going to bring up a lot of blues. You can see we don't quite have enough saturation. And remember, I'm not worried about the sky at all. So bring up the aquas. So I just look at little areas, like say this area here. I just want to just try to match it up. I'm going to bring up the saturation quite a bit. Bring up the yellows a bit. So yellows are kind of just affecting the greens. I'll just bring down the purples and magentas. Not that you can really see them. They're not really in this image, but you don't want those colors shining through sometimes. Right. I think we're pretty good. Think we're pretty good. Might just tiny bit to those shadows maybe. Come back down. This image is going to be a little softer because it's a screenshot off Instagram, so don't pay too much attention to absolute sharpness or crispness. Sometimes when you screenshot as well, it can look a little extra faded. And then just a tiny vignette on this one. And no need for grain. And I think we are good. I think our blacks and shadows could look a little too dark, but I really think it is the screenshot off Instagram. It's pretty subtle. I think that it looks pretty good, guys. Really happy with the water there. So we look good there. Now let's work on the sky. So what I'm going to do is just select this one now. And when I edit this one, I'm just going to look at the sky. I don't care what's down here. And then we're going to blend the two in Photoshop. So just trying to get these tones. Let's maybe up there. Bring down the exposure. Okay. Shadows. Highlights. So highlights is always going to give you a lot more detail. Like sometimes the whites doesn't, see how you don't quite get as much detail with the whites. Highlights is always really going to bring that back. We won't go too far. Bring whites down. What we need to do is the clouds look really, really crisp over in his one. So what I'm going to do is really bring up the clarity. They look like they're very sharp or have a lot of clarity to them. And we didn't do that to the image down here. So I'm going to do it in this one. Really make those clouds stand out. We want vibrance. We want all those tones to really pop. Saturation down maybe. Gonna up the warmth a bit. Okay, I think we look pretty good. We obviously need to add in a lot more saturation and things like that. So let's come into saturation down here, upping the oranges, reds. Blues maybe up there. Yellows maybe a bit too saturated. Then, okay. So we're kind of close on the saturation. You can tell our hues are way off. So you can see our blues are just way too much on the purple side or deep blue side. So what I'm going to do is shift the blues towards the teal. And then you just want to make sure like you test the aquas as well. But I think the blues is what we want. Okay, so now say the yellows, we've got a lot of yellows in there and probably not enough oranges. So just test around what the yellows do. And I think that looks too green if I go in that direction, and then we lose all our yellows that way. I think it's better if we shift the oranges a little towards the red. So I'm looking at like maybe this bit right here, trying to match that one up. And now I think that our parts that already were kind of red are too red now. I'm going to shift the reds this way. I think that's getting there. Okay, so purples. Let's go there. Bring down the saturation of those blues. Look a little too strong. Purples. Let's go down. We go down to luminance now, so you can see our blues are either too saturated, or what I think is we need to bring up the luminance for those blues. So bring them up. Luminance sort of brings out a lot of purple tones up in this area. I might leave luminance up a bit because it sort of brings them out a little more. So if I go to sharpening as well, that should bring out the detail in them a bit. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that, pretty close. Might just try dehaze. Dehaze will always really bring out the clouds. What about okay, I'm going to roll with that. I'm pretty happy with that. Right, so now we've got to blend the two images so it looks like this one. So what you do is go to our main one, which is this one here, And what you do, it's going to be cut off from the recording, but I'm going to go up to help. I'm going to type in Photoshop. Click on Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Here's Photoshop. I'll just go back to Lightroom. I'll go back to our photo of the sunset here. I'm just going to export it. I might just up the saturation of those yellows real quick. Okay, so what I want to do is just go to File and export this image. Okay, after exporting it, I just literally drag and dropped it from my desktop and dropped it right here on top. And then you just want to make sure they all match up, right size. And then that's good. Okay, so and now if you get this little box down here next to your image, it can be kind of annoying. It means you can't do some things to your image. So what I would do is just click here and rasterize layer, and then it's just will make it, I don't know exactly what that does, but it lets you edit it the way you would do. And then this background image, I'm going to duplicate layer, drag it on top. Okay, so now we want to select everything in this image except for the sky. So what I'm going to do is come up to this tool here, and then all you do is just select everything you want. And then zoom in, and what you do is you hold Alt if you think you've selected a bit you don't. Hold Alt like this bit, and I'll just get rid of that. So I've put my brush down to as small as a 5, and you just want to click in between the bits you don't want, and then just spend as much time as you like on it, and then right click and go select and mask. And then the edges look a little rough, so edge detection works really well. If you just slide that up, it will detect the edges and just make a bit more of a better mask for you. And then you can also feather it out a little so the transition isn't quite as harsh. Smooth. I think it rounds off the edges a little. Might do some of that. Contrast. It kind of, yeah, makes it a little harsher. You can even shift the edge, but we won't do that. Edge detection works really well. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. If we just go now to OK. Now if we just go layer via copy, now we have it up here, and we can turn off that one, and then it's showing this layer underneath. Okay, so you can see some small problems with it. You can see the bush from the other image right here is coming through. So if we just zoom in on that, we can clone stamp that one out. So all clone stamp is you hold Option, select this area, and then we'll paste it on top there. We need to turn our opacity up, select there, put on top of there. But we are on the wrong layer, so got to be on this one, or no, we need to be on this one here. So the sky, select here, and paste on top. Okay, just real quick. So that looks okay now. You can spend a bit more time on it if you like. Let's zoom back out. Okay, so the edges are still quite harsh, and you can try softening that up. You could maybe do that after. We'll get rid of this layer now. So we've got our 3 layers. And then once you're done, we will try softening it up in Lightroom rather than Photoshop. We have pretty much just put that image right on top of the other one. And then that's what we brought into Photoshop. Then we slap that one on top, and then cut out version on top of that. So what I'm going to do now is export this and then bring that back into Lightroom. Just go File, hit Save. Let's go JPEG, save. Okay. Then if we go back into Lightroom, okay, now we have that same image in Lightroom, and I just put it next to the one we had before. So you can see they're pretty similar. And then I just want to say, maybe soften up the blend there. I think we've done a pretty good job, but we could just soften it up a touch. So what I'm going to do is just grab a brush. I'm just going to brush over the mountains there. Looks like he's taken away a bit of saturation as well. And then just drop the clarity maybe. Sharpness. And then just grab another brush. Make it a bit bigger. And then I'm just going to drop the saturation a bit. I think that just looks a little more natural when blending them. And it looks as though that's what he's done. So I'll just do that. Okay, and then in the sky, we could do with just touching it up again. Maybe a bit more saturation to those reds. But we'll just a bit more saturation to all of it. I wish in the earlier image I just put more saturation to the oranges and reds, but I don't really want to go back and do all that. Maybe if I quickly brush over them. And yeah guys, I'm pretty happy with that one. I think we got pretty close there, and I'll just leave it there. We could probably soften up those edges back there, but it looks like he kept it pretty harsh there. Just really drop the clarity and all that back there. Or in Photoshop, just add a bit of blur. But yeah, I'll just leave it there, guys. Pretty happy with that one. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Comment down below who you guys want to see. And if you haven't seen already, I've got a color grading course for video to create Luts and how to use those Luts and get some pretty cool styles. So if you haven't seen that for video, if you're interested in that, check that out. check out his presets, guys. I'll be linking them down in the description so you guys can go check them out over there. And yeah, don't pay attention to the sharpness of this image over here on the left, because that's a screenshot, and our one's going to be much sharper because it's the raw image. So thanks for watching, guys. Check out my presets if you like these tutorials. Ton of value in there. I'm currently giving away my entire personal collection, so it's been a long time building that up, and really happy with the feedback from you guys about them. And yeah, comment down below who you guys want to see, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.